This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today I have a special guest here joining me via Skype, former WWE superstar, former TNA star. He's even appeared in Impact Wrestling in recent years, and also Ring of Honor, Zach Gowen, who is the first one-legged wrestler in history, from my understanding. How are you
That's
today?
it. Doing well. Thanks for having me, dude.
Oh, it's a pleasure. But one thing I didn't expect when I announced that I was going to have you on, you have so many haters. It's not even funny.
Do I
I was,
really?
yes.
I had no idea. Shout out to all
Oh,
my
yeah.
haters.
Yeah. I thought everyone would be like positive and find you to be an inspiration, but
Right.
I was shocked. Like I would say about 50% of the comments were just, sometimes those are the vocal minority, but I was kind of blown away by how rude some people were.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love it. I um I don't a lot of that stuff doesn't bother me. Like if I check my Twitter feed or my Facebook or something, like something will pop up and it'll be a hater like making a joke or like at my expense, and to me, I just kind of like if it's funny, I laugh. But if it's like run of the mill, like, oh, you got one leg, you suck. Like that to me, that's boring and that's uncreative, and I think that's whack. But if you, so I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're gonna hate, at least be funny, be creative. I'll get a kick out of it. There's nothing you can say to me that's gonna hurt me, um, or derail what I have going on. But that's I think it might be a reflection more on them than it is on me. But I think that's super interesting.
Oh, for sure. I found it interesting too, and I'm glad that you don't get that as much in your daily life because when I saw that, I was like, man, I hope you don't have to deal with this.
No, but what's really interesting though is that when I made my name in professional wrestling, we're talking about the early 2000s. So this is before like Twitter and social media and Facebook and all and Instagram and all that. So like I was the first of a generation that was on the internet while I was blowing up. So like if I'd go to the message boards, it'd be like, man, F Zach Gowen, he sucks, da 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 da. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, where is all this hate coming from? This is unbelievable. So like I was one of the first of a generation that grew up on the internet that got to see my career play out in real time on the internet. So that was strange for me, like being 18, 19 years old at the time, seeing all that kind of stuff. But now at 37, man, it's my life's too groovy to even really be bothered
Yeah,
by any of that stuff.
at least they know who you are. That's the important thing.
Yeah, yeah. Either way, you're doing something. You're
Yeah.
making somebody feel something. And if I mean that's but yeah, the whole idea is if you're gonna send me something like hate filled or mean, at least be creative. Please be creative. Be funny. Be original. Have something that I've never heard before. That's what I would like to see.
And to get into the actual interview here, were you always a wrestling fan growing up? I'm going to assume yes.
Oh yeah, I had to be, man. Wrestling, my one of my first memories in life is just being 4 years old, sitting on my dad's lap watching Saturday morning WWF programming. But my fandom really turned into an obsession after battling cancer when I was 8 years old. Going through that whole ordeal, losing my leg, looking different, feeling like inadequate as a kid. I found my escape in the magic of professional wrestling. So when I dove into the professional wrestling universe, all those feelings of inadequacy and not being good enough and feeling left out, all of that went away. To me, pro wrestling was my escape, especially as a kid. And so like that obsession turned into like a passion, and it was almost like a train on a one way track in terms of what I was going to do when I got older.
Now, you mentioned you lost your part of your leg when you were 8 years old. How was that to deal with at that age, to find out that after having it for 8 years, you're going to have to lose it to survive?
I'm just really grateful that it happened when I was 8, as opposed to 28 or 38 or 48. Um, because kids are so resilient and they can bounce back from pretty much anything. And the kids are so tough. And so to me, it was just a matter of getting adjusted and getting used to being an amputee. And once that hill was conquered, um, everything else kind of fell in place. And now I can look back, and at the time it was scary, and it was, painful, and it was very uncomfortable. But looking back, I'm so grateful for everything that's happened in my past, because it's allowed my past has allowed a pathway to what I'm doing presently. And that's, I'm making an impact in a lot of people's lives, and I'm providing for my family, and I'm of service to my community. And to me, that none of this would have happened, and I wouldn't have been able to have my life experiences if I didn't go through that when I was 8 years old.
Now, I don't know how it is in the US. I know your medical system is pretty good over there, but here in Canada right now, the cancer doctors are only taking like phone appointments, and people are having their chemotherapies delayed due to the lockdown, and skin cancer removal is being delayed and so
Right.
forth. What do you think about the lockdown actually causing in a country like this the stopping of cancer doctors doing their jobs?
That's the first I've heard of that, and if that's true, that's awful. And I would imagine that the medical system, and I'm certainly no expert, but it has to go on a priority, right? Because if we don't take care of the first thing, then we can't get to two, three, four, five, six. And so I think that's what we're seeing now. And I'm praying for everybody who's afflicted and who's sick. And I certainly hope they come out the other side. But this whole deal is unbelievable, man. We're the same age. We've never seen anything like this in our lives. Like we saw like there's been major events in our lives, right? I remember when the Berlin Wall fell, and that was like the end of communism in like '89. That was huge. And then 9/11 happened. We all remember where we were when 9/11 happened. And this feels up there in terms of worldwide impact and importance. And, number of lives lost as all of those events. And it's just unbelievable when you reflect how much change and how many like life altering events we've been through. And I'm only 37, man. I was born in '83. And it's kind of strange to think about, like what a weird time that we're living in. But yeah, man, I hope everybody's okay, and I hope we can get to a spot where we can kind of contain this corona thing, so that we can attend to the rest of the medical issues that we have out there.
How are things in Michigan with the lockdown? I've seen there's been some protests there. Has it been as serious as I know California has been really strict on it? Florida seems to be the most lenient state so far, but not
Well,
sure
I
about.
guess I guess we have the third um, largest number of deaths related to COVID-19. And so our governor's taking this very, very seriously. And a lot of people are disagreeing with her because, you know, and I don't know, man. I don't know enough to have an opinion. And the information that we get seems to change day by day. I know that there are people who are sick out there. I know that we have a responsibility to keep those who are can be affected more. We have a responsibility as those, because we're healthy, to keep them healthy as well. But you also have people who's they're losing their livelihoods. They're unable to work. They're in super unpopulated areas that don't have the numbers that we're seeing in like in Metro Detroit, in a populated area. And so I don't know what the answer is. I'm just a professional wrestler, man. And so a lot of the times it comes down to what The Rock said: know your role and shut your mouth.
Yeah.
And so I do that a lot because if I don't have a clear understanding of the whole situation and what the right path is, man, then I really don't like to share my opinion. And I mean that's here, and that extends to, like, social media. you flip on Facebook, man. It's nothing but, on both sides of the aisle, just shouting at each other, and it's so much vitriol, and it's so angry, and in my head, I'm like, you both don't know all the facts and what we're talking about, and we've never seen this before, and there's no experience to draw on. So, how can you be so opinionated on this? And so for me, I just kind of take a neutral stance and do the best I can with what I have in front of me.
That's a good stance to take because you're right. There definitely seems to be two sides, and both sides are very opinionated and strong. But back to your wrestling, how did you end up getting trained in wrestling?
I was trained by Truth Martini, who you may know from his run in Ring of Honor as a manager. He managed Jay Lethal during his world title run, or one of them.
Did
Just
Al Snow train him?
He was trained by Al Snow and
Okay.
Lima, yeah, in the late '90s, and then so Truth trained me using the same techniques as Al Snow. He basically took Al Snow's training, brought it up to Michigan, and opened up his own school. And I'm grateful for that because I didn't know because like you said, there's never been an amputee professional wrestler before. So I knew I had the ability and the drive and the passion. That was never in question. The only question for me was, is someone going to open the door for me? Or are they going to close the door saying, hey, listen, we've never seen this before. It is scary. It is dumb. There's too much that could go wrong and not enough that could go right to allow, Zach to come train with us. And thank God that Truth had an open mind, and he saw the passion and the potential right away, and he gave me that opportunity.
How different was your training compared to like your average person? Because I know for taking like a back bump, for instance, it involves swinging your leg back. So did you have any issues like creating momentum to perform certain moves?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is no. I had no issues in like learning how to fall or getting in and out of the ring because how my brain works. And I lost my leg when I was 8. So you fast forward 10 years. I have 10 years when I got trained of hopping around on one foot and trying to keep up with my friends and playing sports with able-bodied athletes, throughout my high school career, so to speak. And so at this time, I could visually see something. Like if, for example, if you were to do a back bump, I could watch you visually do it, and then my brain would just kind of interpret to me in terms of like, okay, I see how you do it. Now, how can I do it? How can I get the same effect, but with my limitations? And so my brain was always really good at kind of like interpreting moves that you could do as an able-bodied person, and ways that I could do as someone who's an amputee. And so, but a lot of the, running the ropes, I mean, I can't do, and it wouldn't make sense. Like nobody would, like an Irish whip me, I would just fall over. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason
Yeah.
why my momentum would just keep going and then bounce back off the ropes. That would be dumb. So there was a lot of like trial and error going in. Okay, does this make sense for someone with one leg? Just because I can do it, should I do it? So there was a lot of trial and error, but in terms of figuring out the physicality aspect of it, that all came very naturally to me because just certain genetic attributes I have, and with being a good athlete and well balanced and being used to hopping around on one foot, a lot of the physical stuff came easy. It was trying to figure out the psychological stuff that was difficult for me.
Is there any wrestler you looked up to growing up that you kind of wanted to pattern yourself after?
Oh yeah, man. I wanted to be the one-legged Sabu when I started wrestling. Like I was a huge ECW fan. My biggest influences are Sabu, Rob Van Dam, Rey Mysterio, and the Hardy Boys. I mean, that's I wanted to be a combination of all of those put in a one-legged package. You know what I mean? Like these are the guys that I wanted to be like. And so because these are the guys that I saw for the first time, that made me think, oh my God, maybe I can do this. Because I mean, when we were coming up, it was all Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Big John Studd and all this shit, and it was like, okay, I can't be 6'8", 300 pounds.
Yeah.
But when I saw Rey Mysterio and RVD and Sabu, smaller guys smaller in stature compared to those, they're still big guys, but compared to those guys, and doing the high flying acrobatic style of wrestling, I thought to myself, oh my God, well I can do that.
And of course, Sabu is from Michigan too. Did you guys ever cross paths in the ring?
We that's the one match I've never had that I've always wanted to have. Um, I've known him for 18 years now, and the man's an absolute legend. Like, and it's so funny because Sabu is one of those guys who you meet him, and if you've never met him before, you're almost in awe. At least for me anyway, where it's like, oh my God, that's Sabu, like that's freaking incredible. And but he does not see himself the way that everybody else sees him. I don't know if it's a humility thing or something, but like to my generation, this guy is an absolute god. Like he influenced an entire generation of professional wrestling, guys that came up when I came up, and he completely changed the game on his own. And he doesn't, and I've tried to sit down with him and explain to him how meaningful and impactful he is to the business, and he always brushes it off. Who cares? Who gives a shit? Whatever. I suck. It's almost that, and it's so weird to me. But I love that man, and to me, he's one of the greatest of all times. And when shows start happening again, I mean, he's going to wrestle like the Sheik did until he's 70, 80 years old. So I hope there's an opportunity for me to wrestle Sabu. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, he can still go at a very high level too. They're still using him in Impact here and there too, I believe.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's you know because when I was coming up, and you would hear the older wrestlers talk about some of the younger wrestlers, like, oh, you're not going to have a long career. Your knees are going to be shot. Your back's going to be shot. Hell, Rey Mysterio is still wrestling in WWE at an insanely high level. 25 years later, like this, like, and so this whole like perspective shift, change in the dynamic of how we view professional wrestling has evolved in real time in front of our eyes. And to me, I think that's so cool. Some of the smaller high flying guys are no longer the outcasts. Like now, and I just did an interview yesterday where this guy was talking about how now he loves turning on Raw or AEW or something because he can see like 2, 3, 4, 5 competitive matches, like really good matches, as opposed to 10, 15, 20 years ago when it was just like storyline gimmicks, promos, backstage, whatever. And I said, well, that's the change that's the shift in wrestling. That's the evolution. Like, it's not so much more about gimmicks. It's about putting on competitive matches, high flying, hard hitting. Like, the product is more emphasized now than ever, and it's just a sign of the times. And, I just love to see it.
Now, you had a pretty early start in TNA. I don't think you were wrestling very long before they brought you in for your first dark match with the company. Could you tell the story of how you got connected with them?
Yeah, so I started wrestling in March of 2002, and my only goal, I never dreamed of being a WWE wrestler. Like, that was never an idea that I had. I never thought it was possible, and I never really entertained the thought. But my goal was to be an X Division wrestler, like Low Key and Chris Daniels and Jorge Estrada, and like in that era, like the X Division to me was Jerry Lynn, Sabu was down there. Like, I wanted to wrestle with those guys, or I wanted to wrestle in Ring of Honor because Ring of Honor just started up and they were using pretty much the same guys, and so that's all I wanted. So I got Bill Barron's email. Bill Barron's was booking talent for TNA, and this is in like November of 2002 or something, or December 2002. So I may have had like 15 matches at this point. Not a lot of experience. I emailed Bill Barron's. He gives me the address. I sent him a tape, a VHS tape of like 3 matches I had in a promo or something. And I said, hey, if there's ever an opportunity for me to come down, I'd love to make myself available. Have you guys take a look at me. And Bill right away emailed me back and said, hey, thanks. We don't have anything open until May of 2003. So why don't we revisit this in a few months or something? And I said, okay, cool. You should be getting my tape in the next couple of days. Let me know if we can make that happen in May. And a few days later, he calls me, and he's like, dude, we're in the office right now. We just saw your tape. Can you come down this Wednesday and have us take a look at you? Like that, So now all of a sudden it's gone from, okay, this might be something that's happening in May to this is happening in like 3 or 4 days. They want to take a look at me. And so Bill Barron goes, all right, Zach, bring somebody down that you can work with and have a good match with, and we'll take a look at both of you. So I called Truth, the guy who trained me, and we went down to TNA, and we had this dark match, and they scheduled like 7 or 8 minutes for us. But about a minute and a half in, they had to stop the match completely because the crowd was going insane. This is the first time I'd ever wrestled in front of like this size of a crowd. And I did like
That
an
was
aside,
Nashville,
the
right? At the
Nashville
fairgrounds.
Fairgrounds. Yeah, man, there's maybe, I don't know, like 700, 1,000 people. Dude, for me, like I was used to wrestling in front of 30 people at my local mall inside of an abandoned, like, old CD store or something. Like this was nuts to me, man. They had like freaking Mike Tenay, Don West, dude. I'm high fiving them after I did an SI moonsault. Like I'm just soaking up this moment because I'm like, it's never gonna get better than this. And then referee Scott Armstrong goes, "Take it home. You got to take it home now." And we're like, "What? What do you mean? We're a minute and a half in front in an 8-minute match. We haven't even gotten to anything yet. We've done 3 things." And Scott Armstrong, the ref's like, he's like, yeah, Jerry's in my ear talking about Jerry Jarrett. He's telling me that they can't follow this because this match was happening right before the live pay-per-view feed was going to hit. And they were worried that the crowd was going so nuts for this that they were going to be dead for their first 2 or 3 segments. And so we're like, oh my God. So we ended up taking it home like a minute in. They sent like Raven to the ring and the Harris brothers just to stop the match. It was just, I didn't know what the hell was happening. It was the most surreal moment of my life. But yeah, but I've always wanted to see that match. I've never been able to see it. But right there, we got to the back and then they offered me a contract. TNA did. They were like, hey, sign this. We want you to wrestle for us. And I didn't sign it because, even though I was young and naive, I wasn't that naive. I wanted a lawyer to look at it, and I wanted to like weigh my options out a little bit. And Truth told me that night, he goes, don't sign that contract because I think WWE is going to be calling soon. And Truth was right. And a few weeks later, WWE called and offered me a contract.
Wow. So did you have any other TNA matches in between?
Yeah, the following week, it was so strange. The following week, they flew me and Truth down to have the exact same match, except this time it was going to be on their pay-per-view feed, so the whole world or the whole TNA audience could watch it. And at the last second, they scraped the idea of me wrestling Truth, and they inserted me in an angle with the Road Dogg and his brother Scott Armstrong. I guess they were feuding at the time. So my first official TNA match was against the Road Dogg, which was a neat
Beat them
moment. But
too, right?
yeah, yeah, this is silly, man. Which was a neat moment for sure. It wouldn't be the way that I would debut a character so unique, I guess, as I am. But I mean, they were working with what they had, and it was short notice. But I always felt really bad for Truth because that was an opportunity for him to shine in front of a national audience as well, and then that was taken away in lieu of putting me in the match with Road Dogg. But that was a special moment too. And then I think a week later, I did another match for TNA. And when I was doing that, the second match for TNA, that's when I was negotiating with WWE.
So what did you tell TNA to hold them off from signing the contract?
I don't remember really. I or I think maybe I was just upfront and honest with them. And I said, "Hey, listen, this is all brand new to me. I have to weigh out my options. I got to talk to my lawyers. I got to, figure this out." And I do remember once I committed to WWE, I gave Jeff Jarrett a call, and I told him thank you so much, for the opportunity, because without that, then this WWE thing isn't happening. But for me at that time, the best decision was to go with WWE. And although I think Jeff wanted me to stay with TNA, obviously, but he was at the same time supportive and happy for me as well, which was really cool. And Jeff's still to this day a dear friend of mine. So it's good to see him and be super successful, because I don't know, there's not many people out there that have a mind for wrestling as sharp as Jeff Jarrett's. In terms of like a producing role, I mean, even as an on-air talent, he's awesome as a wrestler. But he can contribute so much to the young talent, sharing his experience of what works and what doesn't and why. That I think he's just doing awesome now.
And how did you get along with Jerry Jarrett?
Oh, I don't really think I had too much interaction with Jerry, because he was just a guy at Guerrero with the headset, just directing the show,
Oh,
And so there was, besides like some pleasantries, there wasn't like a whole in-depth conversation to be had, really. Most of my conversations were with Bill Behrens, or they were with Jeff Jarrett.
and I noticed on the interview you did with Vince Russo, it seemed like he was a huge supporter of yours. He was working for TNA at that time. Did you have much interaction with him then, or did you only really find out how high he was on you when you did that interview?
Yeah, no, that was a shock to me. I'm surprised Vince Russo even remembered me, because I was only there for like a week or two. You see what I'm saying? So for him to say that, and that meant a lot, and it also meant a lot too when I went to WWE. I met with Paul Heyman, and Paul was telling me that he was really high on me and saw the potential, and he had ideas going out. And me, as a big ECW mark and as a big Paul Heyman mark, and understanding his level of genius and creativity, I mean, my dopamine levels were going through the roof. But it was funny when they brought me up. That's when they took him off the road and suspended him, or like sent him home or something. There's some kind of like clash with Stephanie or something.
There was,
He
I think it had to do with record. He was somehow listing it on calls or something, I
was
believe. Yeah, it was something.
tapping
He's
phone
admitted
calls.
to it since.
Oh, really?
But yeah,
I know that he was the head of creative when I met with him in like February of '03, after I signed my contract, and we were talking ideas, and and the outlook was like super positive and great. And then between February of '03 and then May of '03, when I debuted, somehow he was sent home, and never spoken about while I was there. So I don't know what it was. He might have been listening to people's phone conversation. What a nut,
yeah.
man.
I think he was listening to like the rival writing team's conversation somehow, from what I understand from an interview I heard him talking about that situation, but
Oh,
I
that's
don't
amazing.
remember it clear enough, but it had something to do with that.
That's amazing.
Because Stephanie was one head writer and he was the other or something at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something. They were both ahead of some, and I remember there was some kind of head knocking between those two. I don't remember the specifics. Obviously, you have a little more info on that than I do, but that doesn't surprise me, man.
Well, they made up and he's back as head writer of Raw now.
Is he? Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know. Oh, yeah, I think I did know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
head
he's
writer
head
of Raw.
writer of
Is
Raw,
that
I guess, for the past
that's
year.
when they hired Bischoff back at the same time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They made him head writer, and Bischoff was going to be SmackDown creative.
Yeah. And now
There,
it's Pritchard. For
there's
some reason, they got rid of Bischoff after 3 months.
there's been lots of theories about that.
Yeah, there has.
There's been lots of theories about that. Like he was hired to be the fall guy, and all. I'm so far removed from all of that stuff. Man, I have no idea. It's all very interesting to me, though.
Vince Russo, the way he explained it from
Oh no.
knowing
I,
Pritchard, thought that like Pritchard just weaseled himself in there and like went behind Bischoff's back and weaseled his way into the position, but I don't know. That was Vince Russo's theory.
I'm sure Vince Russo has lots of theories.
Oh, oh yeah, he does. But who was it that reached out to you for WWE? Because I understand John Laurinaitis, I guess, hired somehow some. I actually heard Bruce Pritchard talking about this. You may have heard this,
Yeah.
that they hired a Florida wrestler that was much older and not nearly as agile as you by accident at first, who also had one leg.
That's right. The story that I got was after I had my dark match, word traveled fast to WWE that there was a one-legged guy who got an insane reaction. And I guess Johnny Ace was ordered to hire the one-legged kid without even knowing what I looked like or what my name was, because I wrestled under the name of Tenacious Z at the time, not my real name. And so I guess Johnny Ace put out the word, and I guess Steve Kern at the time was a close friend of Johnny Ace, the former Skinner, sent word back that, hey, I'm training a guy with one leg. And so, I mean, you got to think from Johnny Ace's perspective, how many one-legged wrestlers could there be? There have been zero up to this point, so it's like, all right, there's a guy in Florida, he's got one leg. He must be the same guy. And so they signed him thinking he was me. And then he came up, and by this time I was on TNA on their TV, so they knew what I looked like and all that, and they realized their mistake, and they moved on from that guy. His name's Steve Chamberlain, and I'm going to tell you why that's important in just a second. Steve Chamberlain got released. They hired me, and then just 2 years ago, I've never met this guy in my life. He started, after he got released from WWE, he started a nonprofit that helps amputees get these super expensive prosthetics that insurance won't cover or that they can't afford. And his nonprofit called 50 Legs, 50 Legs, 50legs.org, helped me get the prosthesis that I'm wearing today. They covered all of the costs that my insurance wouldn't cover a couple of years ago. So full circle type of scenario, Steve Chamberlain, I don't know if he starts this organization if he doesn't get released from WWE, and he's helping like hundreds and thousands of amputees worldwide, including me. And then I directly benefited from him, and I got my leg a couple of years ago because of his organization, man. So it's just one of those weird like full circle scenarios, and it's so cool to see him helping people and doing great things. And I'm glad I was able to receive or be on the receiving end of his grace for sure.
Now, we know Bruce Pritchard is known to bend the truth from time to time, but before I did this interview with him, I listened to the clip of Pritchard talking about that situation of why they hired the wrong guy.
Yeah.
And I guess he was in the office at the time too. And his version of the story is they gave Johnny Ace your real name and he went around and hired the other guy anyways. That's Pritchard's version.
That might be Bruce. That might be Bruce cracking wise and trying to be funny though. At the same time, Bruce is known to do that. But hey, man, I can't say Johnny Ace was dude. He's got the worst job in wrestling. He's got the most thankless job in wrestling,
Oh, yeah.
and he's been a punchline for like 15 years. We talked earlier about like hate tweets and hate and all that stuff. Johnny Ace has gotten what I've gotten times a million. You know what I'm saying? And so from people outside and inside the wrestling business, man. But I only judge people based on their interactions with me. And Johnny Ace is nothing but a gentleman, and he's a straight shooter, and he helped me out a lot, man. So I got nothing but good things to say about him. That would be funny if true, though.
So when they called you to hire you, did you have any idea that you weren't even going to spend that much time in developmental? You're basically going to be brought right into the mix?
No. So the idea for me, I knew I wasn't going to do any developmental. I wanted to do developmental because I wanted to prove myself and fit in with the culture of WWE. And I wanted to get in the ring and work, man, because I've only been working for like a year at this point. Like there's a lot to learn in wrestling, and I wanted to keep training and keep, staying sharp and getting better. Their fear was they wanted to keep me kind of a secret until they could debut me to a worldwide audience. which I see, I see, but the creative going in before I did that angle with Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan, the creative going in the week before, it was going to be, I met with the writing team, and I walked away from that meeting with the idea that we're going to do like a 1, 2, 3 kid angle, where over the course of, they're going to debut me, no hype, no nothing. And they're going to show me and talk about my story a little bit through the commentary. And then I'm going to lose the match. And then the following week, they're going to reveal some more of my story, and I'm going to lose the match and eventually get to that 1, 2, 3 kid Razor Ramon type of scenario, and then split off into an angle. Which I was like totally geeked about, because 1, 2, 3 kid pinning Razor was like a memory that was, burned into my brain. It's something I'll think about forever. Having that moment with, I can just picture it like it's in 4K HD right in front of me. And so that was the idea. And then I fly home from the creative meeting, and I have a message on my cell phone from Bruce saying, "Hey, call me back." So I, right away I land and I call Bruce back, and Bruce goes, "Hey, I know we talked about this angle, but what about if we put you in an angle with Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow." Like, what? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, "Yeah, and we're going to start next Tuesday at SmackDown." So I'm just like, it's how fast things can change. And it wasn't even talked about. It wasn't even, a possibility, 2 hours before this, but yeah, they threw me right in there. And that's how I learned that I was going to debut in a Piper's Pit segment.
Your angle with Piper was because you were signed to the main roster. Was it for a financial number higher than your typical development contract?
I don't know. I can't answer that with any sort of confidence, because I don't know what the developmental contracts were. I do know that I signed a very, like, on the low end in terms of downside
Yeah.
contract for me, because they were trying to, like, I didn't have any leveraging power. It wasn't like I could say, "Hey, TNA's offered me 750K a year. You guys got to match that." It was basically whatever they offered. They're the only game in town. You got to remember, this is at a time when, after WCW folded, ECW was gone. They were the only game in town if you wanted to make a decent living in professional wrestling. And so basically, I was at their mercy, and they offered me great money for, being a 19-year-old kid. Are you kidding me? It was amazing. But I know that my contract was on the low end in terms of downsides. And this is, the economy, the business as a whole was smaller than it was a few years ago when it was just on fire. So I think it was kind of reflective of that, as well as them minimizing their risks for something nobody's ever seen before. But in
Right.
terms of developmental contract, I don't know what they were offering.
Yeah, I think back around then the standard would have been around 750 a week, and then when people get called up, it's usually renegotiated or something.
Mm.
But yeah, so you're thrown into this angle, of course, like that's a dream angle of anybody. Hulk Hogan and Piper involved. What's your reaction when you actually show up to SmackDown and you're working with these guys?
Dude, I was just so overwhelmed. Like, it was so surreal. It would be surreal for me now as a 37-year-old to walk in and like work an angle with Hulk Hogan. Um, but at 19, and this is the guy that I grew up watching, and he's man, that the whole scene was nuts, because I'm sitting there in the arena, and I'm just watching the production put up the set and the big SmackDown fist, and I'm like the blue carpet, and I'm just like this. I'm like pinching myself. Like, are you kidding me, dude? This is fucking nuts, man. And then a page or an assistant grabs me and says, "Hey, we have to go to Hogan's dressing room and talk about the angle." So I'm like, okay, my heart starts beating real fast. I'm just following her up to the dressing room. And I walk into this dressing room, and there's Vince McMahon to the left. The first time I ever met Vince. He walks, "Hey, kid, how you doing? Great to have you on the team. Thank you, sir. Thanks for the opportunity, And then to my right is Roddy Piper. It's like, "Oh, kid, how you doing? Great to have you." And I'm just like, what the fuck, right? Like, I'm like, this is nuts, dude. And then I hear the shower turn off. And I'm looking around and I'm like, where's Hogan? I hear the shower turn off. Hogan walks out of the shower, naked as the day he is born. Just walks up to me, towel around his neck, sticks his hand out. How you doing, brother? Nice to meet you. Glad you're here. And I'm just like, what is happening right now? I'm looking around like, where are the cameras? Like, is somebody punking me? Like, this is not. I'm like, put some clothes on, Hogan. He had shower shoes on, right? He had his flip
Yeah.
flops, but that was it. He came out of the shower in his flip flops, naked as the day he was born, and that's how I met Hulk Hogan, just
Wow.
naked as could be. Yeah. It was,
Did
and
he
I'm
stay that
19.
way when they were going over the angle, or did he
I
put
think
some
I was so traumatized that I don't even remember. I'm like, thanks a lot for ruining my childhood, brother. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That's really funny. Did you notice any tension between Hogan and Piper? Because in the past, when they were fighting for those top spots, it was always discussed that they had had some heat.
Yeah, no, there was no tension, and Hogan was really really easy to work with, and he was so generous and nice when he didn't have to be. So like after our segments or a match that I would have, he would sit down with me and explain like, hey, this worked and this didn't work, and how can we improve next time? And as someone who I mean I was so low on the card, and he's Hulk Hogan for crying out, he didn't have to do that. Um, but the tension wasn't between Hogan and Piper. I think they got along fine from what I could see. I could kind of feel some tension between Piper and Vince, which led in a few weeks after we started this angle, Piper got fired for that interview he did. I don't know if it was with Bob Costas or somebody else, but there was some kind of interview that Piper did that Vince didn't like what he had to say, and he was fired. So like from my perspective, I'm like, oh, this is crazy, because not only am I in an angle with these guys and we're trying to get someplace, it's all been mapped out, but now a very key figure, a very key piece in this whole angle is gone. So what are we going to do now? And and then a few weeks after that, Hogan left. Like I guess there was some dispute over his WrestleMania check or something, and then Hogan quit. So like the two like pillars of this angle, Piper and Hogan, are gone, and that's left with me and Vince. So we had to accelerate the match that we were going to have. We were going to push this match down, 3, 4, or 5 months down the road. We're supposed to have a whole different build to it, but we had to get to it right away because we're the only two people left in the program.
Now, I've heard you say in other interviews that there was some jealousy backstage. Obviously, I've been a wrestler. I know what it's like, the backstage environments. It's like a lot like high school, but they see this 19-year-old kid working with Piper and Hogan, I guess maybe a year or two into the business. Obviously, there's going to be some heat. When did you start noticing that? Was that right away?
No, not right away, because everybody was super welcoming. And from my perspective, and again, I was so naive, maybe they weren't. I can only judge on what their interactions were with me. And everybody was super helpful and welcoming, and just awesome. I think the heat started to happen when, um, like I was a typical 19-year-old. I was immature. I didn't really understand the gravity of the gift that was being handed to me. When you have guys there that have been there 12, 15 years in the business, that have seen all sorts of iterations and changes, WCW closing down, ECW closing down, there's only so many spots left. Guys that are working their ass off just to provide for their family and their livelihoods. See, I had no context because I had no experience in that arena of life. And so their perception was, here's this kid who thinks he's the shit, who thinks he's above, he hops on water, who thinks he doesn't need to pay dues, who doesn't need to show up on time, he can do whatever he want. And I can totally understand where they were coming from and where that heat came from. If somebody acted like that now, I wouldn't like that person either. As someone who's a father of two, who understands discipline and responsibility, and who's paid the price to get what I have now, to see somebody come in and take that for granted, I wouldn't like that person either. But so I totally get it, and it's not there's no residual heat from any of those guys, and I have no ill feelings towards anybody, and I don't think anybody has any ill feelings towards me. I mean, enough time has passed and enough maturity has happened, but I totally get it. I think it was a culmination of, it wasn't like a specific event that got me heat. I think it was a culmination of just lots of small, like very irritating incidences, you know?
Now, I remember going to a house show in Calgary where you and Vince did a little skit.
Wow. You were
Um,
there?
I was there for that. Chris Benoit had actually given Harry Smith tickets for like all of the dungeon trainees at the time.
I met Harry Smith in Georgia before the show at the Saddle Dome. They were there. I got to shake their hand and talk to them for a little bit. I remember that event. After the show, we went to the bar and Bret Hart walked in. And Bret Hart like came up to me and shook my hand. And
Wow.
I bought him a beer because I'm like, what the fuck? Like Bret Hart? Like it was unbelievable because he was the last. I mean, I know we're in Calgary, but he was at that time in '03. He was the last person I expected to see around. But you know, I guess friendships go above the certain aspects of the business. But I remember that event that you're talking about clearly.
Yeah, I remember actually there was still a lot of tension because there was in the past they had always let all the Hearts backstage. And for some reason at that particular event, Harry managed to get back, but like a lot of the key Hart family members were not allowed backstage. And some
Really?
of them were really mad because there was a lot of heat at that time still.
Wow, dude. I'm learning something about an incident that I was a part of so many years ago. That's amazing. I had no idea.
But I thought it was cool that like Vince McMahon, who never does house shows, is doing like a house show with you there, doing a, I think, wasn't it a Brother Love skit or something?
Yeah, it was when I was there because they didn't want me wrestling because they didn't want to expose me as a wrestler to the live audience. They wanted to keep that kind of under wraps for the angle or for the match that I had with Big Show. They wanted everybody to see me for the first time when I wrestled the Big Show. And so that brought Vince out on the road because we were just doing like these skits or these in-ring kind of tussles and back and forth or whatever. And they were a lot of fun too. But dude, I had no context. So for me, it wasn't weird that Vince was on the road with us. Um, because it was just what I knew. And so ever since I was there, Vince was on the road. So in my head, I'm like, oh, Vince is always on the road. And like, it took a lot of people to pull me aside to say, hey, listen, man, like, this has never happened before. Vince McMahon never does house shows. Like, this is nuts that he's here. And a lot of the boys didn't like it because you got to be on your P's and Q's when Vince is around a little more so than, you know, when he's not around. So I think there might've been a little residual heat towards me as the reason why Vince McMahon was there, you know, which makes sense.
So did you guys have any bit of a bond or anything from working together on the house show loop?
Yeah, I got along with Vince swimmingly, man. I was never kind of like freaked out or intimidated by him. I could always come to him with an idea. He always had time for me. We always discussed stuff before and after our segments, and he was always so like incredibly generous. Same way Hogan was when he didn't have to be, you know. And he looked at me as an investment, and I think he liked being in the ring too. You know, and so me and Vince, we got along great, man. Like it was. I wouldn't say we're buddy buddy. And we're cracking jokes all the time, but it was super professional. But like, we got along well.
Did you travel with him in that time, or were you traveling with other people?
No, I was traveling with Rhino and Nunzio and Paul London and Spanky. Those were my road dogs. Those are the guys I was traveling with. Matt Hardy sometimes.
And you were involved with an angle with Sable where I guess at one point she tried to seduce you.
Yeah.
What was going through your head during that?
It's so stupid. Please don't look it up on YouTube, like that angle with me and Sable, because it has the worst acting you've ever. I'm not an actor, like I'm a professional wrestler. I'm a speaker. I like to be authentic when I speak and use my words and share my story. I can't act. You can't like feed me lines and I'm gonna regurgitate them. Anyway, it's really stupid and awkward. Imagine going through high school and then having your entire high school career in like student council or the debate club or on the basketball team and having all of that on YouTube. It's really uncomfortable. Like, and you can just look it up anytime. It's kind of weird. But anyway, to your question, the thing with Sable was just, it was uncomfortable because here's a woman that I just grew up like idolizing. Hugest, I mean, I came of age and Sable was the wrestling woman. For guys are it was Sunny and it was Sable, and when Sable she was so. But I'm sitting there and I have to like remember my lines. There's producers everywhere. There's camera people everywhere. The lights are on me. It's hot. It's uncomfortable, and like I don't know. It was just weird. It it wasn't as fun as you would think, just because of all the added pressure and all the extracurricular activities that were going on around me with the cameras and the lights and the writers and everybody else in the room when that shot was happening.
Was she already like publicly dating Lesnar by that point?
Nah, it wasn't public at all, and it was we weren't supposed to know about it. But you know how the boys are, man. Once word kind of gets out, and then it's everybody knows it, and then we're all kind of looking out for it, but nobody's saying anything to, you're not going to say anything to Brock. You're not going to say anything to Sable. You're not going to. It's something that the boys talked about amongst themselves, but never like in a public forum.
Yeah, because I could imagine that might be on your mind a bit too. Like you got to do this sexual scene with her, and like Brock Lesnar is rumored to be dating her.
Yeah, yeah. No, you don't want to be on Brock Lesnar's bad side. That's for sure.
So was she like you always hear nightmares about how she was with some people. I'm gonna guess you weren't very threatening to her, so she was probably fairly nice to work with.
Yeah, I don't really remember all that much, to be honest. So that tells me that it was pretty neutral.
Yeah, I think she was doing a weird angle with Vince McMahon at that time too, wasn't she?
I think she was like kissing him and stuff, or they were
Yeah,
doing like a romance thing, and yeah, to like, but to like no reaction, which was
yeah.
the, and I think it was to no reaction because there was no point, and the story didn't go anywhere, and there wasn't like a beginning, middle, and end. Just like one week we tune in, and then there's Vincent Sable making out for no reason in the middle of the ring. So we're like, all right, cool, I guess. But like, what's the point?
I almost wondered if that was a punishment angle for her suing WWE.
Yeah, who knows, man? Dude, it would take a lot of schooling and many years of experience to break down Vince McMahon from a psychological aspect. I mean, there's no question the guy's freaking nuts. Just you look at his body of work, you look at his schedule, you talk to people that used to work with him on a close basis. The man's certifiably insane, but he's also a freaking genius, and he's also changed my life for the better. My interactions with him has helped in many aspects of my life and my family's life as well. So there's nothing but love and good things from my interaction with Vince. But from like an ancillary point of view, you can see the guy's nuts, man. I mean, how old is he now? Like 75?
74, yeah, 75 or 74.
No signs of slowing down. Like there's going to be no retirement, you know? Like this is what he does, man. He's built different than me. That's for sure. But
Unless
nothing
the
but love.
rumors of him selling WWE to Disney are true, but I don't believe so.
Are those rumors now? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
that's the big talk this week that they might be selling, but it's just rumor. You know how wrestling is.
Yeah.
For the very reasons you say, he's a workaholic. Like it's hard to imagine that he would sell, but you never know.
I don't know.
But Brock Lesnar is probably the scene that you're remembered for most in WWE because you did a crazy blade job for that scene. and it was so brutal when I think he threw you against the pole.
Right.
Any memories of that?
Yeah, I love it, man. Brock took care of me from a physical aspect when he didn't have to. He took care of me in the ring. Um, he was so professional to work with, and I'm so grateful that we could create a moment like that. That's like burned into the psyche of many wrestling fans' mind because they were at the right age and they saw it at the right time. Just like when I was a kid and I saw Earthquake's debut when he jumped on the back of Ultimate Warrior with Dino Bravo out, And to me, I'll never forget that angle, and I'll never forget that moment because I was at a certain place in my life at a certain time, and everything was just right for that moment to happen. And I have fans come up to me all the time at wrestling shows talking about, "Hey, man, when I was 5 years old, and that thing with Lesnar, and that was just, I'll never forget it." So for me to be able to take part in an angle that is burned into the minds of like professional or many fans, to me, I have a tremendous sense of accomplishment that comes with that. Very grateful for that. But that was yeah, that wasn't even supposed to happen that day. I was supposed to wrestle Matt Hardy that day because I was in an angle with Matt, and we were supposed to do something. And then SummerSlam was the following Sunday. And but when we got to the arena at Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, my hometown, plans changed as they often do in wrestling, and they're like, "Hey, you're going to work with Brock tonight." So in my head, I'm like, "That's sweet," because I'm thinking about how big he is, and I'm thinking about like all the crazy bumps I could take, and I'm thinking about like how can we get the most out of this. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and then they called my mom. My mom was front row. That was my mom, my brother, my grandmother. And it was one of the most bloodiest matches in WWE history. That was the first time that I ever gigged my forehead, and I've only done it maybe 2 or 3 times my entire life. And so I can't imagine. It's kind of weird now. In 2020, this would never happen. You never take a 19-year-old wrestler who's never gigged before, and then on national TV, tell him, "All right, go out and get some color tonight." Like that would not. There's like so many like that soil is so fertile for lawsuits. It's not even funny. And so the reason why it was so bad was because I took the chair shot from Brock, and then I stuck the gimmick in my forehead, and nothing came out. There was no blood. And so in my head, like the time is ticking away because I know Brock's going to come get me, and we're trying to get that shot of me, right? And so I'm like, oh shoot! So I did it again, and then there was nothing. And I'm thinking, oh shit! Like if I don't get this color, like the impact of this angle isn't going to be nearly what it needs to be. And so I just as Brock is picking me up, I just said, fuck it. And I just jammed the blade in my head, and I pulled across. And then that's where you see like the insane amount of color, come down because it was do or die at that point. It was now or never. Like we have to get this color. And I've never did it before. So I just went all out and I had to get it. Um, but but yeah, so that's why it was as bad as it was. But nothing but just as I look back, like the way that Brock kept me safe is such a testament to his professionalism and how good he is in the ring. And I'm forever grateful I got to do that with Brock.
And of course, in your actual debut match, you defeated the Big Show, which not many people can say.
All right.
Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I loved it, man. Shout out to the Big Show, dude. Like one of the coolest dudes in the locker room, and there were many times that he would pull me aside when I was fucking up, in terms of my actions and my attitudes and my behaviors, and he'd be like, "Hey, Zach, you gotta chill out. You gotta do this. You gotta do that." He always tried to look out for me, and I always appreciate that, and I always appreciated him laying down for me too. Obviously, we wanted to protect him and keep him strong. I think Brock Lesnar gave him an F5, and Kurt Angle gave him an angle slam before I did a moonsault on him to make him look not, too bad. But if Big Show didn't want to didn't want to do the job, then I wouldn't have. Then he wouldn't have done the job. It's that simple. He had that much clout and that much respect. And so there was a huge moment after that match when he had like, I don't know, like 15,000 people just erupting kind of at once. That was a turning point for me in terms of um, um, the psychological aspect of professional wrestling. Because up until this point, and again, I'm brand new to the game. I'm thinking it's all about like what I do in the ring and how do my moves look, and can I take the biggest bump and can I jump off the rope the best and all this stuff. And when you get like a real visceral emotional reaction, not as a result of the moonsault, but as a result of the story that we told leading up to that point, for me that flipped a switch in my head of like what wrestling is all about. And so that was my debut match for WWE, but the bigger victory for me was learning like another layer or aspect of the professional wrestling business directly from that match.
Did you get a chance to watch any of his Netflix series yet?
Yes, yeah, my kid's 7 years old, and
Oh,
he's never watched wrestling before, but we watched WrestleMania, and like he's into it. I never really pushed wrestling onto him. I never whatever he's into, he's into. He likes Fortnite. He likes the Avengers. You know what I'm saying? So like that's what we watch really. But I come downstairs one day and he's watching the Big Show on Netflix, man. And I sat down and watched 2 or 3 episodes of it. Big Show's awesome in it. It's a cute show. My kid loved it. He watched the whole season of it. So to me, it's job well done, man. I love to see wrestlers successful outside of the business, whether it's acting or podcasting or DDP yoga, whatever that looks like. I love seeing, or even Kevin Thorne's like this super successful real estate agent in Indiana.
really? I did
The
not know.
former Mordecai. Like I see him all the time just doing it, and I'm just like I love seeing the boys be successful outside of the ring, because there have been so many tragedies and there's so many stories of guys after their in-ring careers are over. You see them like wrestling is all they have, and it's always a sad story. So to see people successful outside of wrestling, I think is important.
And of course, Kurt Angle, one of the greats of all time. You also worked with him. How was he?
He was amazing, just insane. Just seeing him on TV is one thing, but watching him do what he does in person you realize that he's a different breed than you are. You feel very humble when you see Kurt Angle. The dude could barely walk at this time. He'd have to get to the arena 2 hours early, and they would just like put all these electrode gimmicks on his back just to like loosen up his back enough for him to wrestle. And then you saw like the output. You saw what he looked like walking into the arena, and it didn't even come close to matching what he did in the ring. So you saw like the dedication, the passion, the discipline, the sacrifice that he made for wrestling, and you couldn't help but feel inspired when you're around somebody like that.
Did they have that for him at house shows too, or just the TV tapings?
Yeah, the house shows, man. Like every time I saw Kurt, he had to get to the arena like an hour or two early so they could work on his back, just to allow him to get in the ring.
And to think he was still wrestling up till a few years ago.
It's unbelievable, man. Like the guy won the Olympics with a broken neck.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know about him. And so he takes that mindset and that passion with him in all aspects of his life. Wrestling is no different, man. That's just who he is. That's not who I am. If I got a broken man, if I break my toenail, I ain't getting off the couch for 2 weeks, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, let alone go wrestle, man. But some people are different, man.
If you were Kurt Angle now, he was just released from WWE. I'm pretty sure he might still want to be involved in the business. What company would you go to if you were him? Keeping in mind he might not be able to wrestle, he might have to do other
Yeah,
roles.
well, Kurt's amazing in anything he does, man. I mean, his character work is arguably just as good as his wrestling, his in-ring work. So I mean, he'd be great in AEW. You kidding me? I'd love to see that. But then if you're AEW, you don't want to run the risk of like getting WWE guys because you're trying to build your own identity. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know whatever he does, and I'm sure he still wants to work in some capacity. He's just that he'd go nuts if he sat home for too long.
Yeah.
Um, And so yeah, wherever he ends up, it's going to be awesome. I'll be watching. I'm a fan.
And Matt Hardy recently jumped over to AEW. I believe, was Matt Hardy your only loss in WWE?
No, Matt Hardy's, well,
Maybe
no,
your only TV loss.
my own. No, I beat Matt at a pay-per-view clean because I think Matt had some heat going on, and that was punishment for something, or I don't really remember so long ago. But yeah, I wrestled Matt, and Matt was not excited about losing to me. That's what I remember clearly as a fact. Matt was not excited at all about losing to me, but that didn't stop him from going out and putting together the best match he possibly could with me. And for us, like, if you watch that match now, man, we do everything. Like, it's just boom, 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 fast, 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 move, 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 move. It makes me look good. And he was a true professional. And he's probably the one guy that I learned the most from was Matt, because he's the guy I wrestled so much on the house shows. And so, just in terms of the different nuances in wrestling, I learned so much from Matt, and which is really cool for me because Matt, growing up, was my idol. You know, him and Jeff. So to be able to share that with Matt was really awesome for me.
I had a fan that wanted me to ask you how your interactions with Test were.
I didn't have many really. Uh, Nothing really jumps out or comes to mind. He was let's see, he was dating Stacy at the time. I remember that. I was more interested in what Stacy was doing than
Yeah.
Test, to be honest with you. But he was cool. I think he was on he might have been on Raw and I was on SmackDown. So and we kept the brand separate except for pay-per-views or like certain pay-per-views. So my interactions with Test weren't all that much or nothing really comes to mind.
And you also worked with Stephanie during the Vince McMahon angle. How was she?
She's amazing, just sweet and kind and smart and driven and beautiful and all of that. Like I was so impressed with her poise and her confidence and her ability. And looking back, to put it in context, this is the first time she was the boss. Like up until this point, she was Vince's daughter, and now she's head of creative and she's the boss. Man, she's running SmackDown. And looking back with that context, I'm even more impressed by her and the job she did. She was awesome.
And the match itself with Vince, I understand it was pretty stiff.
Yeah, it had to be because Vince isn't a wrestler. As much as he wants to be a wrestler, he's not a wrestler. Like, he's very like stiff in his movements, and he doesn't move very well, and he's not very athletic or agile or well balanced at all. Like, we've seen the way he dances. Like, the man can't dance.
The
Like,
famous entrance into the Royal Rumble or whenever he jumped into the ring and his knees blew out.
just rip both quads off the
Yeah.
bone. Like, he's super jacked. He's super tan, which is amazing for a guy. Definitely for a guy his age, he's incredible. But the man does not have an athletic bone in his body, so he can't. Like, wrestling is a dance, man. And certain, like, it's a give and take, and it's certain movements, and you're kind of in sync with the guy that you're working with. With Vince, it has to be almost a real fight because he doesn't know how to sell. He doesn't know how to sell and then give and then go back. So when you punch Vince, like at a certain point, he had me in a leg lock, I think, and I was just trying to fight my way out of it, you know. And so I was giving during the match, I'm just giving him these like shots, and then he's not selling them, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then he looks at me, he goes, "If you're gonna punch me, then fucking punch me, kid." I'm like, all right, you said it, not me. So, you know, so there I am in the middle of the mat punching Vince McMahon in his face as hard as I possibly can. And every time I hit him, he's like, "Yeah, that's it, kid. I'll do it again. Do it again." Like, he's getting all into it. And I'm like, what the hell, man? But that's the only way that he could sell is if he actually felt a real punch to his face, you know? Um, and looking back at that match is nuts because I gave him an SI moonsault. And, you know, he's like a 52, 53-year-old non-wrestler catching a one-legged kid who's doing a backflip 12 feet in the air. It's just nuts to think about nowadays. It's kind of funny, but no, that was an amazing opportunity, dude. And I'm so like, not a lot of wrestlers can say like, hey, I had a pay-per-view match with Vince McMahon, and I'm one of a handful of wrestlers that can say that. And for that, I'm like truly, truly grateful.
Yes, you had a short time in WWE, but I think as short as it was, you couldn't have asked for a better career as far as all the people you worked with. Most WWE wrestlers will never work with stars like that.
No, man, no, and just like a lot of things in life you don't really appreciate until you have an opportunity to look back on. Um, the more I look back on that time in my life, the more grateful that I am to be able to do the things I did. Because a kid like me, I came from a broken home. I'm a product of public housing. Going through cancer at 8 years old. To fast forward 10 years or 11 years after that, to being able to be in the ring with Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon and the Big Show and Roddy Piper, dude. For a wrestling fan, bro, that is just. I probably still don't really understand the full gravity of that time in my life, but I'm telling you that grows each year that I get away from it, for sure.
And Sean O'Hare unfortunately ended up committing suicide. I guess the last memorable angle he had was the angle with Piper and the stuff he was doing with you. Any thoughts on him?
I just think it's so sad. I just think it's so sad, man. I was a huge Sean O'Hare fan in WCW. I was like, dude, here's a guy who's fucking 6'6", 300 pounds, looks like the way he does springboard swantons, for crying out loud, like. And so when I came up, truth be told, I was really excited. I was excited to work with Hogan and Piper, but I was equally as excited, as crazy as it sounds, to work with Sean O'Hare, because I'm thinking, man, this guy is like gonna be it. There's no reason why he won't be. Um, and I think they were trying to use that angle as a vehicle for him to be elevated too. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think about guys like him, and I think about Crash Holly, and I think about Mike Awesome, and I think about Canyon. And these are guys that, often we talk about wrestlers dying and we don't mention those names. Obviously, Eddie and Benoit come up all the time. But there have been so many tragedies from that era, and so much loss of life needlessly, through whether it's addiction or mental health issues. That it's just heartbreaking to think about, And so I want to, I just wanted to mention those names because I feel like nobody really does, and I think their contributions to the wrestling business were great, but the bigger tragedy is that we lost these young men that were, in terms of their whole lifespan of what should have happened, it was cut way, way, way too short, and it makes me really sad.
Did Benoit treat you all right?
Yeah, except the one time he knocked an Egg McMuffin out of my hand and told me that, hey, you're a WWE wrestler. We don't eat that shit around here.
In the dressing room?
No, man, it was in the parking lot of the gym.
Oh,
It was like 8 a.m, dude. It was late night, and I was on my way to the gym and I stopped to get an Egg McMuffin. Bro, I was 19 years old. I couldn't put on weight no matter what I ate. Like, it didn't matter, at that point. But like, Benoit had so much respect for the business that he did not want anybody to see a WWE athlete eating like that. It wasn't for me. It was for the perception of it all, and that's how intense the guy was. The most interactions out of the guys that we're talking about that I had with was with Eddie Guerrero. I was Eddie's young boy, basically. I would pick him up from the airport. I'd take him to the gym, take him out to eat, bring him to the arena, take him back to the hotel. I would just drive him around. And that man was so sweet and so nice and so generous and just so loving and caring as a human being. Like, he was, he was just um, above and beyond, anything that uh, I could ask for. And just in terms of somebody that I work with, somebody that I looked up to, and just overall, just human being, man. He was an inspiration for me.
Was that because he had that crash and maybe had his license suspended, or was that just you met him, developed a bond, and he made that offer to you?
I think it was just me trying to look for an opportunity to pay dues. And I think, however it came about, it came about.
And I understand Arn Anderson worked with you as an agent quite a bit. How was he?
Great. The single most underrated professional wrestler of all time. Like, you watch Jim Crockett promotions from the late 80s, man, like Arn and Tully were just the absolute freaking best ever in terms of a tag team, man. I mean, Arn was a hero of mine. Another one that I just got to work with, man. It was great. I got to shake his hand every day. It was awesome.
And Michael P.S. Hayes is a writer back there for WWE. Did you have much interaction with him?
Not a lot with Hayes, um, but I just remember him, the way he dressed, and I remember thinking to myself, and this is almost 20 years ago. I remember thinking to myself, man, you're too old to be wearing that, bro. Like, what are you doing, right? And then it's 20 years later, and he's still dressing the exact same, if not even more flamboyant now, you know?
And I think John Cena was a heel when you were back there. It was I think it was before he really took off. One of the fans brought up that I guess you had an issue with him at one point. What was that all about?
No, I wrestled him once.
Okay, so that's a mistake.
Yeah, well, not a personal issue. John was awesome. He was doing a Doctor of Thugonomics
Yeah.
rapper deal, and you could tell, like, just based on the reactions, you could tell like something was different about John than most of the other guys in the back. You know, like you just you sense just the charisma or the connection or something. You knew that, like, we were looking at the next superstar.
And was he good to work with in the back? He seems like he's a very focused and serious guy.
He's a great guy. No, he's focused and serious and disciplined and all that, of course, but he's also super funny and kind and really fun to be around, for sure.
Did he give you any advice?
No, because he was like still trying to figure out his path up at the time. Like, he had a match with the Undertaker, which was like a really big deal for him. He only debuted the year before, so he was still in the John Cena infancy. You know what I mean? He wasn't the John Cena that we know and love today. He was still starting to come up.
How was Bradshaw in the back? We've heard that he's liked by some, disliked by others.
Yeah, I heard that too, because like I said, I was on the internet, man, in real time. I was on all the dirt sheets, reading this, that, and the other about the
Oh, so
different
you
guys.
knew about it ahead of time.
Dude, I was on the message boards, bro. Like, I knew all about like the reputation that JBL had, and I'm thinking, man, I'm screwed. He's gonna like steal my leg, or he's gonna glue my leg to the ceiling, and he's gonna shit in my bag. He's gonna beat me up. Like, I was already convinced of this going in, but he just couldn't be a nicer guy. Like, he was cool as shit. He's a great guy, man. I ran into him a couple years ago at a signing, and he walked up to me with his arms out, and he's like, "Ah, Zack Ryder, great to see you." Then I didn't correct him. Like, he legitimately thought I was Zack Ryder. He had it mixed up, but I wasn't going to correct him. I'm like, "Oh, John, good to see you too, pal."
So you mentioned that I heard on another interview right before you finished, you got injured. Somebody told you on a certain SmackDown or something you were going to have to appear in Wrestler's Court or something, but you happened to get injured and
Yeah.
you couldn't appear. Who was the one that came up to you? Because isn't it always the Undertaker that is the judge for that?
Yeah, the Undertaker was going to be the judge. Um, and Canyon was going to be my lawyer. And this is a credit to Canyon. Canyon was such a sweet soul that It was all set for him to be my lawyer, and we set out the defense, and we knew what we were going to do. But he called me the week before this wrestler's court was supposed to happen, and he's like, Zach, I'm so sorry, but I can't represent you in wrestler's court anymore as your lawyer. And I'm like, oh, why, dude? I'm like, what am I going to do? He goes, well, the thing is, because I'm representing you, he goes, Zach, you have so much heat that the fact that I'm representing you is getting me heat. And so it's starting to affect what I'm doing in my position within the company. So it's been strongly suggested to me that I step away from you as your lawyer, but I wanted to call you and give you the heads up and let you, I didn't want you to hear it from anybody else first. And so that's why I respect Canyon so much, that, he had to do what was right for him. But he also
Didn't
made
help
that.
him much in the end.
It did. No, he still got fired or something, but he still called me and he said, "Hey, this is what it is, man." And to me, that's such a stand-up human being that I find completely inspirational, and it's what I aspire to be like. But
I
then
actually did meet him once, just for the record, for anyone watching this, and he was very nice to me too.
he's just an amazing guy, and that's why I miss him so much. And I think about, like, he was too ahead of his time, man, because gay wrestling, like, as a gay wrestler, it was so groundbreaking when he came out. And I know, like, the turmoil and the struggle that, he was under in terms of, like, being public about his sexuality. And dude, in 2020, like, it's not a big deal. Nobody
It's a
cares.
benefit in some ways now.
Dude, it could be. There's many wrestlers that are gay. There's, and it's like, and the great thing about it is it's not a gimmick anymore, right? Being being a stereotypical gay wrestler, a gay heel wrestler that, like, kisses the baby faces and the crowd goes, ew, that's, like, so passe and dumb and cheap that anybody who does it is a piece of shit, as far as I'm concerned. And it's whack. And so now you have all of these wrestlers who are gay, but they're amazing wrestlers, and they just happen to be gay. And their personalities in the ring is not defined by their sexuality. So I think we've made, like, tremendous strides, and I like to think that Canyon was on the tip of that spear, in terms of, like, sexuality, being open with it, and being an awesome wrestler at the same time, dude. I love Canyon, man, and that's why I get sad when not a lot of people talk about him, and I miss him because he's one of the good guys.
So I guess you got injured and nothing ended up coming of it. Do you think when I heard you tell that story, it made me think, I wonder if you had gone to the wrestlers' court and somehow paid your debt to the wrestlers, if that would have affected you staying longer, because you never ended up coming back, I guess, from that injury.
Yeah, no.
Oh, is this your son?
Yeah, this is my 4-year-old Henry.
Hi, Henry.
You say hi?
Hi.
Sorry we're keeping your dad so long.
What do you have in your hand?
Girlfriend.
That's your girlfriend. What's her name?
Jessica.
Jessica? Yeah. So this is my son's girlfriend, Jessica.
Okay.
A little stuffed dog. And
Well,
this is my other son.
Oh, there's your other son.
Yeah, this is Nolan. He's 7. These are the
Hello.
Gowen boys.
Nice.
There's a good possibility that they're going to be professional wrestlers when they get older.
Future
Yeah.
tag team champion.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you might be right or onto something. If I was allowed to kind of pay my dad or face my the actions and behaviors that I exhibited, and had the opportunity to make amends, maybe that would have helped me stay longer in WWE for sure. That's a good thought.
And I understand that Diamond Dallas Page and you are fairly close. He was also good friends with Canyon.
Yeah, I love DDP, man. DDP, he got me doing the DDP yoga like maybe 5 years ago. I ran into him at a indie wrestling show in New Jersey, and I met DDP once before, and I was a huge WCW fan, so I was a huge DDP fan. And I met him once before in TNA in like 2005, so I didn't know if he remembered me or not. So I walked up to DDP, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm Zach Gowen. I just want to say, it's nice to meet you again. I just wanted to tell him I was a big fan because, like I said earlier, I love it when people are successful outside of wrestling, and I love it when wrestlers help other people. And so DDP, that's the best of both worlds, man. That's the Venn diagram of service and success, man. DDP is right in the middle of that. And so I just wanted to express, my admiration to him. And he looked at me and he grabbed me by the shoulders and he's like, "Bro, we got to get you doing the yoga." And I'm like, all right, sure. But in my head, I'm like, you'll never catch my one-legged ass doing freaking yoga. Like, that will never happen. And then, true to his word, 3 days later, he sends the whole freaking yoga mat, the DVDs, the whole program, the book, all the whole package for free, sends it to my doorstep just out of just generosity, And so I looked at that as an opportunity, because to me, when someone who's really successful reaches their hand back, I think it would serve me well to reach back and say, hey, whatever you're asking, dude, like I'll follow your path, because I want to be like you. And so I did the program, like 4 weeks into, I hated it at first. Because everything hurt, my knees, my back, I wasn't balanced, my core was weak, my shoulders hurt. But like 4 weeks into it, I started looking forward to the workouts. All of the pain in my body left. And then after I finished the 13-week program, I felt so good physically. Then I got into the ring again, and I was moving like I did when I was 18 years old. And this is after years and years and years of abuse and hopping on one leg and taking bumps and doing all the stupid shit that I've done for so long. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, man, I'm all in on this DDP yoga stuff. And that's my main workout. And then I became certified as an instructor. So I run classes in Detroit, when we're allowed to have classes, obviously, because of the COVID-19. I'd go to Children's Hospital in Detroit, and I work with the kids there. I work with amputees at the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor, getting them on the yoga mat, doing DDP yoga with them. And so for me, it just became another tool, not only for me to stay healthy, but for me to help other people. And so all credit goes to DDP on that, man. I love that man. I think he certainly does the Lord's work. That's for sure.
And a lot of fans wanted me to ask you about your brief time in Ring of Honor, what happened there, why it wasn't a longer run.
I wrestled a couple of times in Ring of Honor. Let's see. I think the first time I wrestled, this might have been like 2007 or something. I wrestled Delirious in a dark match in Detroit. And Gabe was booking at the time, and he was really pissed because Delirious gave me way more than what had been agreed to before the match. Like, he made me look too good, which didn't serve Delirious or Ring of Honor well at all. So I think Gabe was mad about that. And then I did a few things with the Age of the Fall with Jimmy Jacobs. That was when I was just inconsistent as a person in terms of like substance abuse and responsibility and being able to follow up on stuff. And then, let's see, I wrestled Matt Taven in Detroit, which is like, I think the last thing I did with them. And that was awesome. But I think I'm a good guy to have come in and have, and just to be kind of like be like a surprise or a shock. And then we put on a good match, and then we put over whatever talent we're trying to put over. Because it's either that or it's like we have to draw out this long storyline, beginning, middle, and end, just based on the limitations of my character and the potential of my character at the same time. So for me as a wrestler, there's not a lot of middle ground. There isn't a lot of like 3, 4, 5, 6 month runs that other wrestlers can kind of come in and out. Either it has to be all in or just a one and done. And so it's just happened. Same thing with Impact. A couple of years ago, I came in, great crowd reaction, office loved it, and then we're just trying to, do we turn this into something, or is it going to be once every couple of years? And a lot of times, how the creative process works, it's like we don't have the time, the bandwidth to space out this long storyline for Zach when we have all this other stuff going on. So that's been my experience.
And when you talk about your addiction, I know you went to the WWE's rehab sponsored program. Was that pain medication and alcohol, or was that recreational drugs?
Yeah, no, that was I was using pain medication recreationally. It's a little bit of both, man. Yeah, it's everything. I'm a drug addict, meaning if I drink or take anything mind altering into my body from a physiological aspect reacts different than if you were to take it or if my wife were to take the same thing. Basically, once I pop, something happens that doesn't allow me to stop. And once I make that decision to never pick up again, at some point, without any outside interference, at some point, invariably, I always make an excuse or justify or rationalize a reason that this time, you know what, it's going to be different, or this time I'll manage, this time I'll control, and then it becomes my priority in life. And everything, if that becomes one, and everything falls beyond, that becomes A, and everything else falls below that, and so eventually, it kills me, or it sends me to jail, or it sends me to an insane asylum. And I'm so grateful that WWE started this program, that when I was at my lowest, I reached out for help. And even though I hadn't made that company a dime in 7 years, they took care of they took care of the bill, that allowed me to get the foundation so I could build the rest of my life. For that, I'm grateful, man.
Well, congratulations on
Thank
overcoming that. And just a few more fan questions here. You were on American Ninja Warrior. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was nuts. I'm sorry about my lighting, man. Am I dark here? I feel like I'm really dark.
I might be able to touch it up a bit, but it's not too bad.
Okay, good. I'm not a. When we started this interview, there was light outside. I didn't think.
Yeah, it went a bit longer. You give detailed answers, so that's good.
Good. No, Ninja Warrior was awesome because I competed against able-bodied athletes who train year-round for this event, and I got booked for the show 6 weeks before the show. I'm on one leg and I have zero training. Yet I was able to move along further in the course than 50% of the athletes who train every single day for this event. I had no idea how big of a deal it was. It was just kind of a gag or a goof that I submitted my application. And then when they called me and I started training, I realized how big of a deal this was. And then they aired my episode, and like 20 million people tuned in to watch my run when it aired, which is the highest rated run on the highest rated episode of that season. And they didn't, which was it was life changing. And they tuned in because they connected with my story, right? Not because of me or my name or whatever it was. It was because my story represents what can happen, on like a human level, beyond wrestling, beyond Ninja Warrior, beyond motivational speaking. Represents what can happen if we never give up. What can happen if when we struggle, we reach out and we ask for help. What can happen if we take action based off the advice that we get? What can happen if we serve other people? What can happen if we're dedicated, if we're passionate, if we're disciplined, And to me, that's like, to have a visual representation of that is just powerful. And for that tool, or for that media, so to speak, to be able to connect with so many people, it's just so, it means the world to me, man. It really does.
And another fan wanted me to ask you if you think WWE is ever going to put out an action figure of you.
I don't think so, man. WWE ain't gonna put out nothing, dude. I would love for them to put out an action figure. I'd love to be a downloadable character on the 2K games, for crying out loud. Not because of any sort of like financial gain or check, but like, how cool would it be if I want to see my kids pick Zach Gowen, when they're playing with the action figures or they're playing the game. They would probably pick Brock Lesnar and pick me to be his opponent, so they could beat the crap out of me. That's realistically, that's probably the scenario. But it would just be cool to show them, But no, I don't know how to get that done. If anybody has any ideas out there how to get that done, I wouldn't even know who to contact or how to campaign for that to happen. I'm not even sure, but it would be cool.
People will write it in the comments. And for the Insane Clown Posse, did you enjoy working for them?
I love those guys. 100%, man. Those guys are super inspirational to me because, they created a market where there was no market there before, and they took what they loved and their passion, and they manifested their destiny and their success. And you can say whatever you want about their musical abilities and talents. To me, it doesn't matter. They've influenced a lot of kids that were disenfranchised and ignored by the mainstream, and they carved their own path. And to me, anybody who carves their own path, I think that's awesome.
Is the Handicap Heroes tag team still a thing?
Yeah, 100%, man. I love Greg. Greg makes me a better wrestler, and I like to think I make him a better person. So we get along well.
Now, I know you consider your biggest achievement in life is overcoming the addiction, but what do you think your biggest achievement in wrestling is?
Uh, Biggest achievement in wrestling, I would say, probably that night where I pinned the Big Show. I have to say that visceral reaction. That was the beginning, middle, and end of a story that we told that connected on a real, authentic level. And for me, I don't know, how do you quantify biggest moment? I'm just saying, for me, that was my biggest moment, because that's when, like, my third eye got wide open in terms of, like, what wrestling can be and why we do what we do. And so for me, that was such a huge moment.
And if you were to go back to WWE or AEW, who would be the ideal dream opponent for you to feud with?
Um, I think I do really cool things with Baron Corbin.
Interesting.
Yeah, that, as strange as that sounds, I think, like, for me, when I watch Baron Corbin, it's almost like John Cena in basic thugonomics days, where you can tell we just had to figure out the combination to unlock this thing, right? And so I feel like I could aid that process of figuring out what that combination is to take Corbin here, he's awesome already here, but bring him to the next level and bring him up to the all-time greats. And maybe I think too highly of what I can and can't do, and that's certainly a possibility. But man, I would love to try.
And this was another fan question. I'm sure the DDP yoga helps, but they asked how wearing the prosthetic leg for all these years has affected your hips and spine.
Dude, everything's so good. I'm 37 years old. I'm in zero pain. And like you said, that's really thanks to DDP yoga. And I don't know. Maybe I just have probably a lot to do with genetics too. A lot of things outside of my control, just the way everything kind of was put together when I was made. But no, I don't. Even when I wrestle, I still wrestle, like, I still move like I did when I was 18. So shout out to my genetics and shout out to DDP yoga, man. It's a great, for me, a great combination.
And what are you doing for work now? I know you're still wrestling, but I assume because you have kids, you probably have to have a regular job.
No, I don't have a I don't know if I'll ever have a regular job. I travel. Man, I'm on the road. And why I say the Big Show, that moment is probably the biggest moment for me, was because at that moment I kind of realized the true purpose, or the higher purpose, which was not so much to be a professional wrestler, but to find platforms in order to share my story, to help other people, and I do that now through youth engagement work. I travel the country. I work with thousands of middle school, high school, college students on a yearly basis with my company, Cool Speak. They're based out of Pennsylvania, but we work all over the states. To be able to put on keynotes and workshops and work with students and work with the teachers who serve these students and work with the parents of these students all at the same time, man, it's really important work. To me, it's a lot like wrestling, because what I do is I'm sharing my story to make an emotional connection to elicit some sort of change. And so while it's not me taking bumps and doing moonsaults, I'm using it with my story and my words and the tools that I've accumulated over these years. And so to me, the output is the same, which is looking for platforms to share my story to help somebody else.
And if people want to check out your website or look you up on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, just go to zachgowen.com, or it's all at Zach Gowen, ZachGowen.
Now, last question for me is, as a guy that had issues backstage that you did, I've never been like a full-time WWE wrestler or anything, but I know what backstage politics can be like. What advice would you have for wrestlers on how to handle themselves in backstage politics? Because that's as big as an important thing as it is to be in the ring.
Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right about that in terms of its importance. I would say control what you can control and don't worry about the things you can't control, right? So if you can control showing up on time, having a good attitude, being of service, doing the best job you can, training, all of that, if you take care of all of those factors that you can control, you're going to be fine, man. It's when you start getting in your head and you start manipulating things and trying to rearrange life to how you think it should be. That's when, life's going to push back at you. At least in my experience, it is anyway. But no, keep your head down and work hard. And most importantly, try to help somebody else.
Well, I've heard you'd like to be a producer in the future for a wrestling company as well on the side, so
For
I
sure.
wish you luck with that. Is there anything you want to plug or any final remarks to make to the fans here?
No, thank you for watching. It's a long interview. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. Thank you for the interest, man. And to the wrestling fans, thank you for your support. And please continue supporting the business that we all love so much and we hold so dearly to our lives. And I wouldn't be able to live the life that I do right now. There's Henry. Yeah. Good night, baby. I wouldn't be able to live the life I do now if it wasn't for my involvement in professional wrestling. So please keep supporting it, keep supporting indie wrestling, and without you guys, we don't exist. So you guys, wrestling fans, are the backbone of this industry, and I won't let anybody forget it.
Well, I appreciate your time. I think you're definitely underrated, and I hope some of those trolls and haters, after seeing this, they gain a little bit more respect for you. And to close this off, as you show your double bicep,
Yeah.
if Baron Corbin was looking at the screen right now, what would you tell him?
You want to cut a promo on Barry Corbin?
Yeah.
Put me on the spot like that. No, man. I would say I wouldn't say anything to Barry Corbin. I'd say nice to meet you. I can't wait to work with you, and I can't wait to help you step up your game to the next level, man. It's my pleasure.
Good. I'll stop it at that.